Thank you so much. But before you take your seats, don't be very quick. I'd like you to just look around. Just look around. If it's someone you have not seen for the entire year, or you have never seen, I just want you to do a fist, just a nice fist to 4 or 3. Tell them welcome, and then now you can take your seat after that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just a fist. Only 2 or 3. That's enough. That's enough. You may take your seat now, or you may take your seat. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So good morning, distinguished guest, led by our keynote speech and guest, Honorable John Mbadi, Cabinet Secretary, the National Treasury and Economic Planning. Our guests as well. Good morning once again, and to all participants and the panelists. It's a privilege to come together today in the wake of the 2025-2026 national budget, a budget that aims to navigate Kenya's delicate fiscal tightrope at a time of significant economic pressure and opportunity. The choices we make now, whether in policy, revenue collection, financial oversight, or private sector engagement, will profoundly shape our future and trajectory. Today's conversation brings together key stakeholders from government, financial services. We also have industry experts to unpack this budget and reflect on its implications, and explore also how we can collectively foster a more stable, resilient, and inclusive economic future for all Kenyans. So thank you once again. And at this moment, before we go in, some quick house rules. I've been requested to do that. I think the first one, which is quite important, I've been told by the security team in the hotel that there is no planned fire drill. So if you hear it, get out to the nearest place written fire exit. It's important that we do that. Next is that we have free Wi-Fi. If you need access, it's on the table. Just log in and you're allowed in. If you need to visit the washrooms, just right outside on the left or on the right, you'll be assisted. Of course, we also have serving stations for a coffee or something on the immediate right and even at the back entrance. So once again, welcome. The team, courtesy of Deloitte, has put together a hashtag, and they have been sharing a lot of sentiments, videos, and all that to enlighten Kenyans. And I'm sure this one makes our cabinet secretary very happy, to enlighten Kenyans on the budget. So definitely, you know how we operate. It's very much online. So there's a hashtag, and anytime I'm given a hashtag by the teams, I say hashtags are meant to be used. So please turn to the person sitting next to you once again. The one with the better phone, just take a nice selfie. Tell them you're right here. We're enlightening on something. Do that, because how else are you going to use it? How else are you going to use it? So if you don't mind, the chair of KRA is right here. So you should be, I think your phone is very nice. I don't think you have a phone with our CEO. So it doesn't matter. So please do that. It's actually practical. I was just looking at you waiting. Hashtags are meant to be used. I was given, it's my KPI. So please, let's do this. Yes. Are people taking? Are people taking or looking at me? Yes, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Use your phone. Use your phone. There you go. Yes. Yes, you have to share this on your LinkedIn's everywhere else. Yes. Lovely. Oh, someone is telling me to explain. A selfie is a should I go there? Really? Yes. Yes. The way the chairman of KRA is doing it. Yes, that way. There you go. Please make sure you share. You can also do a groupie, anything like that. Let people know this event is happening. To our online participants, all those who are logged in as well, whether you're home, office, feel free as well to share out and let people know that we are doing this. Thank you so much. If you don't mind, on your phone as well as you're sharing that on the hashtag, please log into the slido.com. This platform, we shall use it for our questions all through the day. So it is important that you log in. As simple as that, just type slido.com and use that passcode on your screen. It's 3147774. It will help us to have a seamless way of engaging with the panelists, with the speakers. Sometimes I say that even when we have a speech being given, you can also interact with it. Sometimes you want to really appreciate something that has been said. You can also drop in a point there or two to ensure that we are engaged with every conversation that happens. That's okay? Excellent. So there you go. Slido.com, 314-774, all through the 774, all through the day we shall engage on that, especially with our speakers and panelists. I want to check whether you have managed to get in there. It's very easy. So who's in the room? Just your name and organization. Just a simple way of checking that we have managed to log in. It's on your screen if you've logged it in, so it will be very easy to see whether you've done that. And 4 persons are very fast. Excellent. There you go. Let's just appreciate very quickly some of the people. Fred. Hey, Fred, you're the first one. Excellent. That was fast. From Deloitte, we have someone called AO. I think that's how he likes to be named. We also have Rotich Wesley Kiama. Thank you so much. Otili is in the house. Thank you. Enco Cap Capital by Kiama. Thank you. Nyagodhie of Deloitte as well. Thank you. 20. My sample will stop at 40. Once we have 40, at least I know we'll be engaging a lot here today. So we're moving 35. Someone's name is the passcode. That's okay. That's okay. We appreciate that you're here. There you go. And even Anne, thank you so much. At least I just wanted to check. And Joachim as well. Thank you so much. An excellent representation. Even VSF Germany is right here. Thank you so much. SBM Bank, all that. Thank you so much for that. Great. I thought 40 was going to be the sample, but look at it. Thank you so much. Very quickly as well, let's just see the feel of the room, courtesy of our subject today. I always like joking. You see the 10 persons who are still typing their name? Remember those times in class where we had those guys who were there? Let me not go there. Excellent. So how would you describe your confidence? Yesterday, the Cabinet Secretary took a lot of time explaining and even presenting the budget in Parliament. How would you describe your confidence in Kenya's economic outlook for 2025-2026 following this year's national budget? And we want to appreciate that because today we are discussing that. It's just nice to have a poll and ask ourselves, how would we describe this? Are you concerned? Are you cautiously optimistic? Very worried? Neutral? Very optimistic? Let's have this because it also helps the people here who are about to speak to really gauge where are we, and probably at the end of the day we'll be able to know have we moved at least from where we are. And wow, I'm hoping 41, it keeps changing, but around 40% there are concerned. Others are cautiously optimistic. The very optimistic, I think, ladies and gentlemen, we still have some work there. But hopefully after today's conversation, we shall see. It helps to gauge our conversation today. Final poll. Which aspects of the 2025-2026 budget that was presented and has been on discussion are you most concerned about? Is it about the rise in public debt? Is it tax administration and collection? Is it impact on business and consumers? Is it inflation and cost of living? Is it investor confidence and financial stability? I would like to as well know. This will also help in our panel discussion, because we shall be addressing these things. Let's just have the feel of the room before we get engaged so that we can see how this is going to be. Thank you. The sample is there. People are concerned. Want to see us. The rise in public debt, I think you will have a say here and you will talk to them as well about that. And the representation in the room is amazing. Some of the people who are really excellently represented here. Thank you so much for that. And that sets the pace for the day. My name is Maina Chege. If you like, you can pick the first two syllables of my name, M and C, and I'm your MC of the day. Thank you so much for having me, Deloitte. At this moment, I want to invite the Chief Executive Officer, Deloitte East Africa, Anne Moriah, to kindly come and open for us the session. A round of applause to her as she comes to set the day. Karibu, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, CS, for coming to join us. Thank you so much, Chair of KRA, one of our panelists, Joshua, and all our clients. I'm really excited to see you all here, and I'm glad you came so that we can break down all the things we've seen about this year's budget. All right. Maybe let me start by framing that I am a glass three-quarter full kind of person. I'm usually quite optimistic. And so I guess it's been great to see that a lot of the macros in the economy are at the right place. Inflation's come down. The growth is still pretty good if you look at what's going around the world. But I guess we're still tempered by lots of stuff in the geopolitical side. Tariffs coming at us. Israel has attacked Iran. Who knows what's going to happen about that? So I think there's just way too much fun in our world and so much uncertainty. But at the same time, there's a lot of interesting things going well. Agriculture did well because of good weather. The tech side is going up. Manufacturing is still struggling, but on the whole, a good side. inflation down, dollar rate quite stable. So a lot of good things showing up, and the interest came down from the monetary policy from 10 to 9.75 just earlier this week. So lots of interesting things going on. But I guess there's still always concern about the balance between more taxation and economic stimulus. And I think that's a thing the CS and his team have to keep balancing, because we do need more productivity in the economy for us to lift it up. So while we say we're walking a tightrope with this budget and the current economic situation, I'm still quite positive that there's a lot of the engagement we've had is being listened to. We can see some of it coming out in the policies that have come through. And I think in the end, as a resilient bunch of people called Kenyans, it's all going to pan out in the end. So welcome to all of you. We hope you get some really great insights out of all our good teams that are going to talk through this. Let's just get straight into this. We're going to start with Gladys, taking us through the economic update. Then we're going to have the keynote speak from our CS. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Anne. So Anne has kind of set the scene. So I always come in this budget events to set the scene, because we always say the economy does not operate in a vacuum. We are part of a global economy, and that influences what happens. And every year that I've been coming here since COVID, there's been something new happening. Now, the last was the tariffs and Trump, and then now what has just happened in the Middle East. So we live in interesting times, and when we live in these interesting times, we realize because we are impacted by anything that happens from a geopolitical perspective, we are not immune. And if we look at the global outlook, because before we come and see what's happening in Kenya, in East Africa, and then Kenya, it's good for us to understand what's happening globally. If we look at the global economic growth, of course, it's being tempered by what's happening in the US with the tariffs, the tariff war. We don't know where that will end up. And that means that global growth has actually been revised downwards to around 1.9% in 2025. And this is just because of not understanding what's happening, in the global footprint, and and how everybody will react to what's happening in the US. When we look at inflation, it has been well contained globally, apart from the US. With the tariff wars and the impact of this on the US economy, the Fed is unable then to lower interest rates, and so there's going to be a challenge there. So coming then to sub-Saharan Africa, better GDP growth than obviously what's happening globally. We'll get to the 3.8 and then up to 4.1 in 2026, which is good. The challenge remains the debt burden of the countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and I've seen even from the poll, people are worried about public debt, and that then operates then across even sub-Saharan Africa, because most of the debt then is in foreign currency, which means then there's pressure on local currencies going forward. But I think from a sub-Saharan Africa perspective, when we look at the young population, we always talk about it as a dividend that we need to tap into. But the only challenge is with the rates of unemployment, and how do we tackle that? Because if we don't do that, then it becomes a ticking time bomb. Closer home to East Africa, again, the performance from a GDP perspective has been good. When we look at where Kenya is heading, when we look at Uganda, and even then from inflation, we've been able to contain, apart from our neighbors in Ethiopia. But I mean, we have to commend them from the high 30s, looking at then inflation at about 19 to 20. So inflation has been well contained when we look at the East African economy. Again, debt comes closer home from an East African perspective. because we are using debt to finance infrastructure, but then the repayments then pose several challenges, because how then do you deal with the repayments when something happens to your currency? If it weakens, it means then your debt burden becomes higher, not because you've borrowed more, but because your currency has weakened. So it's a delicate balancing act. You do need infrastructure. You do need to finance the projects that need to be financed. How do you finance them becomes the key question, and how do you manage that going forward? The beauty of the Kenyan economy, I'd say, is it's well diversified. Our services industry is quite key, and when we look at GDP growth projected about 5% in 2025, the rate cuts that Anne talked about earlier, we see how that will trickle down, and whether Joshua will see his NPL going down based on then consumers being able to pay back. Because what happens in a high interest rate environment, consumer spending is limited because of the interest cost, and then also the cost of doing business becomes expensive, and then that also then trickles to consumer prices. So it just becomes a very interesting dynamic that we need to look at. Agriculture then, yeah, the good rainfall, the subsidies from a fertilizer perspective means that we've had our food inflation at least decline, and it's important then that we ensure that from a sustainability perspective we are able to feed our people. So the key risks again for 2025, again, it's debt remains one for Kenya. Obviously, what's happening from a climate perspective, I know the government is doing a lot around climate and seeing how to ensure that the shocks, don't become, difficult for us to deal with. And then, of course, we are still vulnerable to what is happening globally. I did speak about inflation, but that chart just shows you where, the price increases year on year. If you look at it, it's mainly, on the food side, on the personal care items and things like that. So it's just for us to understand, inflation has come down, but again, given the disposable income available to Kenya, that's Kenyans, then that does pose a risk on consumption. I have spoken about interest rates and the impact that would then have on, the cost of doing business, and the ability then of consumers then to have maybe a higher disposable income if their borrowing costs are lower. I think one of the most difficult places we find ourselves right now is availability of disposable income, or what the disposable income is for Kenyans. If we look at the average spending of most Kenyans, they actually borrow to be able to achieve certain things that they need, from a day-to-day perspective. So we find even as much as household incomes may seem to be increasing, the expenditure does, pose a bit of a challenge. When you look at then what is available to households, they've had to make certain decisions to just ensure that they are able to make ends meet, which then means that for certain industries and in certain areas of spending, we have seen then there's been an impact around that. Exchange rate, we're in a better place now because the exchange rate has been fairly stable right now. So we are in a relatively good place. We don't know what will happen when, the debt repayments then come up, later, in 2028 and later. So it's good for us to just think about that. But we're in a fairly better place than we were before the last Eurobond. So, and that is good because then imported inflation declines in terms of our cost of fuel. I think we've experienced a fairly stable environment even from a fuel perspective. Debt, again, continues to have an impact. I did talk about part of it is not really about increased borrowing, but some of it has been about what happens to the currency from the time you borrow to the time you repay. So again, it's an area that is being watched. I know, Mheshimiwa CS, in your speech, you talked about the importance of having a review done of the public debt, just to make sure that we are doing the right things. And that reform will really help, because borrowing is good, because otherwise Joshua would not be in business. However, it is about what's the optimum debt for us. I think it's one of the things that's been critical for us and for the future of Kenya is the education sector, which has, I'm talking about budget allocations, which has been good because we've allocated quite a bit to the education sector. There's a lot of reform happening to ensure that Kenyans remain as literate as they are and competitive in the world that we are in. Again, I think one of the other areas, energy infrastructure and ICT, and then also just looking at public administration, international relations, just some of the areas where this year's budgets, just pick a few highlights on where the spending is going. And I think it's good that the government is looking at how to build capacity in the various places. I'm sure we'd have wanted a bit more in health and other areas just because of what's happening around just ensuring that Kenyans have access to health and other services that they require. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I have set the scene for the rest of the session. I'll now hand over back to Maina.
Thank you so much. And actually, the next slides as well will be well continued in by Fred Omondi, East Africa Tax and Legal Market Leader at Deloitte. Please put your hands together to Fred as he comes as well to proceed on and take us through that. Yes. I think Fred was consulted whether he should mention that tax thing. Yes.
No, I was checking with the CS whether he titled his bill something like Small Beautiful Bill. That's what they do across the pond. So I'm going to take us through a brief overview of some of the key, budgetary measures around the revenue, as well as the taxes. So I hope you'll pay attention. Although the CS said that this budget didn't have a lot of taxes, but obviously there are still a few provisions here and there, either as a cleanup or to rationalize tax expenditure and other aspects of the tax legislation that needs reform. So in terms of budget, we keep seeing that being on an upward trend. So this year's budget will be 4.2 trillion shillings. Up from about 4 trillion shillings last year. So it's a growth, although it's a modest one, and of course we understand that's informed by the need to achieve fiscal consolidation. Obviously, Gladys mentioned the issue of debt is a big concern, so we can see some effort to contain the growth in the budget, which I think is a good thing. And but the trend is generally upwards in terms of budget growth. In previous years, it's been as high as 10% upwards of 11 and 12%. So this year, there's some effort to contain that growth, which I think is commendable. And hopefully, if there isn't other shocks, although we've just been informed that there is a lot that's happening, so that can definitely impact the budget. Now, in terms of the ordinary revenue, which is where most of the tax revenue sits, so ordinary revenue is typically tax revenue plus investment and other non-tax revenue. We are seeing the budget projecting about 2.7 trillion in ordinary revenue from 2.5. So last year was an interesting one. When the budget started, it was at a much higher level, but then there were two supplementary revisions which brought down the target or the projection to 2.5 trillion. So this year that goes up to 2.7 trillion. Again, it's not as big an increment as what was projected last year. Actually, last year, additional tax revenue that was supposed to come through the finance bill was projected at over 300 billion shillings. But this year, it's just about 30 billion from the new tax measures. Obviously, there are other administrative measures that are supposed to contribute towards the growth in the tax revenue. But again, some effort to contain that. CS did allude to that in his speech, that is informed by the appetite of Kenyans in terms of new tax measures. I don't know whether those are the same Kenyans sitting in this room. Bwana CS, you may want to ask them if they are willing to pay more, or if there are those Kenyans who don't want to pay more, but there's some good effort there to contain the growth in revenue as well, and to avoid, tax increases that are deemed to be burdening the population. So that's a good effort on the part of the government. In terms of the composition of tax revenue, we see income tax still accounts for at least almost half, actually, of the tax collection, 47%. And then VAT, which is expected to perform better. So maybe KRA Chair will tell us, given the new VAT measures, I'm sure many of you have heard about special table and the like, some interesting points for debate coming up later, but he'll tell us whether he sees VAT overtaking income tax or whether it's excise duty. We've seen over the years significant growth in excise duties because as they broaden the scope of goods and services that are subject to excise duty. So this composition is not quite unique. It does vary between developed and developing countries. In developed countries, income taxes contribute twice as much as indirect taxes. So ours is more or less in line with what we see for developing countries. But there's always a debate around, do you want to put more money, in the pockets of wananchi so that they can spend more? So in that case, then you may want to reduce income taxes and maybe collect more of consumption taxes. But it's a debate as well in terms of equity, because again, income taxes allows you to pay based on your earning ability. So that balance between equity as well as putting more money in the pockets and collecting more from a consumption perspective is one that the debate continues. Just moving the slides. So I did mention there the big revision that happened last year in terms of projected, ordinary revenues from, 2.9 trillion to 2.5. So that was informed, obviously, by the withdrawal of the Finance Bill 2024. So that did, have a big impact in terms of government revenue. And so, like I mentioned, the government has been conservative this time round, just to make sure that, it can accommodate the expected revenue collections. However, even with the revision in last year's estimates, we still see the Revenue Authority tracking slightly behind in terms of collections. I think as of April, Chair, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as of April, you are running 5% behind in terms of tax collections. So again, these projections are, of course, predicated on the Revenue Authority being able to achieve, its collection targets. So even though we may not see a lot of new or increases in taxes, then you should expect the revenue to be a bit more aggressive in calling upon you to pay your taxes. But we do hope that a lot of that effort will go towards, of course, netting in new taxpayers, expanding the tax net, targeting those who are non-compliant, so that the rest of us, I'm assuming if you are seated in this room, you are tax compliant, so the rest of us can go on with our business, without much interruption. So hopefully we'll get that commitment from the KRA as well, but just to assure them that those who are seated in this room are actually compliant. Next, please. So I did make an attempt just to look at our medium-term revenue strategy and see some of the measures that we promised to put in place and what we have done so far and what is still pending. So you can see it's a mixed bag there, but obviously some of them have been addressed in this year's budget, including reduction of tax expenditure by doing away with a lot of incentives to try and make sure that all of us are contributing to the government coffers. So there's a lot that is happening that is underpinned by the medium-term revenue strategy, which covers the period up to the next financial year. So we can see that progress there. I think what CS, some people may be interested in here, is whether there'll be a reduction in corporate taxes or even personal tax, if I was to speak for myself. So that can be a special one that you may consider, although you've already read the budget, so maybe you'll tell us to wait until next year. Now, moving on to some of the key tax measures from an income tax perspective. Again, a lot of it, like I said, is not introduction of new tax measures, but really trying to reduce tax expenditure. So we see measures that are limiting incentives. One of them is tax loss limitation. So now tax losses will be carried forward for a period of up to 5 years. Now, this has been changing quite a bit. It used to be indefinite. Then it moved to 5 years, 10 years, and now we are back again to the 5 years. So I think what we are calling for there is really more of policy stability, so that we don't see the frequent changes, because then businesses are able to plan ahead. But this is the change that has come through, and we think that it's informed by an attempt to ensure that if you are in a loss-paying position, you at least don't be in a perpetual loss. You are still able to pay taxes. There was an attempt a few years back to introduce the minimum tax, alternative minimum tax, which was ruled to be unconstitutional by the court. So this measure could be informed by that, ruling coming out of the courts on minimum tax. Even though we are managing or reducing tax expenditure, there are still incentives that are being provided to promote the Nairobi International Finance Center. So a few incentives like lower corporate tax rates for those who are licensed by the Nairobi International Financial Center Authority. So that's a key, it's a good measure. I guess what we have to look at is then the overall environment that would position us, in a good position relative to some of the global peers, like Dubai is a well-known, international finance center. So in addition to the tax incentives, we then may want to look at all the other aspects of that package that would attract global players into the Nairobi International Finance Center. If you're in the motor vehicle assembly industry or affordable housing space, the concessionary tax rates have been done away with. So that is something along the lines of reducing tax expenditure. So that we'll be seeing a lot more of that in terms of the trend to remove preferential tax rates and to remove some incentives so that we can, grow the contribution from each sector or each taxpayer. Some two key good changes here relating to advanced pricing arrangements. So for the multinationals in the room, transfer pricing has been a headache. And one of the measures to help you mitigate that risk is advanced pricing arrangements, where you can sit down with the Revenue Authority, come up with an agreement in terms of your, related party pricing. So we think that that's a very good move, and we hope that the implementation measures will be put in place fairly quickly, so that a lot of the multinationals can take advantage of that. From a capital gains tax perspective, there's a concession to allow for families to restructure their wealth into family-owned companies. So that's also a positive move. It helps in wealth as well as succession planning. Looking at withholding tax, some two key changes there. One is for freight that is paid to ship operators. That will now be subject to withholding tax. Previously, it was accounted for by the shipping agents. So we think in terms of administration, probably the existing, arrangement where you collect it through self-declaration by the shipping agents on behalf of the principal was probably relatively more straightforward. This withholding tax will now mean all the other, traders who are paying for freight would have to account for withholding tax. So we think it may be more administratively demanding compared to the existing arrangement. Digital assets, we know that we are encouraging, investment in crypto and other digital assets. So to aid in that, the tax rate on that has been reduced from 3% to 1.5%. Again, that's a positive move, just to, spur more innovation in that sector. From a personal income tax perspective, I think this is where most of the good news was, although maybe one would have expected a little more, but this is where it was, much more positive. I see CS shaking his head, but remember I said that was a personal ask, so it's not from everybody in the room. So, but per diem, for those of you in the private sector, the amount of non-taxable per diem has been 2,000. That has been increased to 10,000, so that will be quite useful in reducing the administrative pressure in terms of, accounting for per diems. For those of you who are constructing homes, the mortgage relief has been extended to loans that you take out for construction. Previously, it was only for purchase of new homes or improvement of existing homes. So this is also quite positive. And lastly, gratuity is now exempt from tax. So that will put more money, obviously in the pockets of, retirees or those who are entitled to gratuity. So positive news on the personal tax front, no tax increases there. But maybe the other aspects we can discuss offline. In terms of VAT, also some cleanups here. So really, VAT is one interesting one because every year we keep seeing movement from zero rated to standard, standard to exempt, and so forth. So, nothing so significant here. I think is an effort to reduce on, again, tax expenditure through VAT refunds. But I think they are similar to what we talked about in relation to tax losses. What maybe we would be asking for is just more stability and a clear framework in terms of what we would want to be standard rated, what we would want to be zero rated, and what we would want to be exempt, so that we don't see the frequent changes year on year. And then from a compliance perspective, everyone will now be expected to issue tax invoices, whether or not your supplies are taxable. So this is an attempt to, embed more accountability so that the Revenue Authority can be able to see, the business transactions and, then expand the tax net. So it's a good move in terms of getting all of us to be compliant and visible to the tax authority. And a few measures there that may be a bit burdensome to businesses in terms of the reduction of time frames for claiming refunds. So you better be careful in terms of not being time barred. So that has been reduced from 24 to 12 months, including claiming refunds on bad debts, which although is a good move, but the timeline has been reduced. So be careful around the period that you have to be able to claim your bad debts and VAT refunds. I already talked about that. Next. So excise duty, and I mentioned earlier that excise duty has seen expansion in scope over the year, so it's going to be one of the key contributors to domestic revenue. I think the key change there is in regard to non-residents. So the scope of excisable services in terms of non-residents has been expanded to cover any service that is provided through a digital platform or through the internet, which then just seeks to bring more of these services that are provided online into the excise duty, within the scope of excise duty. So that's expanding the tax net, and the non-residents are the ones who are going to be affected. In terms of local products, we've seen a reduction in excise duty on neutral spirits. This is an input for those in the alcoholic beverage sector. So it's a positive move in terms of their cash flow, because previously they could pay it, although it was a higher rate, but still claim it. And now the rate has come down, so it will be positive from a cash flow perspective. So some positive change there. When it comes to miscellaneous fees and levies, we've seen a reduction in export investment promotion levy, especially in the steel sector. Again, that's a positive one because it's an input into a lot of processes. So a reduction from 17.5 to 10%, that should be good, and it also allows the cost of inputs to come down. So that's positive from a miscellaneous fees perspective. We've seen a reduction, rather not a reduction, but a removal of exemption on RDL, which is the Railway Development Levy, and IDF affecting the aircraft. So what has happened is the exemption is now limited to large aircraft. The smaller ones, which I guess are used mostly by our politicians, Honorable Nderitu will confirm that, those will now be subject to tax, so they are willing to contribute more, but those that relate to larger aircraft will be, exempt, except that in this particular instance, spare parts, some of them will not be exempt, which can be quite significant for airlines. Last time I checked, the cost of an engine, for example, for a Dreamliner operated by the national carrier is upwards of $25 million. So some of those spare parts may need to be considered under this exemption. In terms of customs duty, now these are decided at the EAC level. So there'll be an EAC communication that will come through at the end of the month or in early July. But some of the key measures that have come through really are just the extension in terms of the stay of the application of the CET rate. So this allows the country to apply rates that are different from what we have within the EAC, and some of it is to either enhance food security, like in the case of rice and wheat, for example. Kenya will apply 10% instead of 30% that is applicable under the EAC, and some of it is to promote or to protect local manufacturing. So in that case, either through a higher duty rate to prevent unnecessary importation, or in some cases a lower duty rate, like in the case of packaging material for tea, to be able to promote tea exports. So those are positive measures to protect and promote certain industries. Now, lastly, I'll look at tax administration. I think the key changes here, and one that appears a little controversial, is what we call the pay-to-play, in terms of if you have a dispute with the Revenue Authority and you lose your appeal either at the tribunal or at the court, you will now be required to pay the tax before you go into further appeal, either at the court or at higher levels within the court system. So the controversy here is that sometimes the initial assessments are very inflated. So obviously, if you require somebody to pay first before they appeal, then the cash flow impact could be debilitating for a number of taxpayers. So maybe that's something based on the public participation. We hope Parliament will be able to consider that and make it a little less, or a little more accommodative to taxpayers. So that's one of the key controversial ones. The other one was around the sharing of personal data, although I've gotten assurance from the CS today and the KRA that they're actually not interested in seeing your personal data. All they want to see is your financial transactions so that you can be able to account for tax on it. So so hopefully they'll keep their word, but they've given me that promise, so we'll take their word for it, because that can be a bit controversial in terms of what data does KRA want to access. But we've seen a lot more, integration of KRA systems with taxpayer systems, and this is to enhance accountability so that they're able to collect the correct taxes from all the, various sectors, including the informal sector. So I guess that's the intention, which is a noble one, and so we hope that it will be implemented in that spirit. So really, those are some of the key changes. I did just highlight the key ones because of the time that we have, but feel free to engage us even after this. We'll share a more detailed publication, and we can continue to engage, as we look forward to the Finance Act coming into place. So it's now my pleasure to welcome our CS, Honorable FCPA John Baddy, to deliver his keynote speech. And he has allowed me to take a few questions after his speech. I don't know how many there are, so the faster you are, the better. We may take 2 or 3 questions just after his speech, because he has other engagements that he needed to attend to, but he is graciously accepted to be our keynote speaker. Welcome, Waziri. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Fred. There's a gentleman here who really was on my neck. He works with you, Bruno. If it were not for him, probably I would not be here. Even though I got a good invite, but I was wondering, I was saying, can't I just excuse myself? It was really on my neck, so I'm here. Good morning. This engagement has also made me see some of my friends who I've not seen for long. Fred, I've never seen you for a long time. Saddam, are you still called Saddam? This gentleman was my classmate, and we used to call him Saddam. So I don't know whether that was his official name, or we were calling you Saddam because of Saddam Hussein. But anyway, I'm happy to see you once more. Joshua, good morning once again. I have a speech here which I will not read. I realized if I read this speech, I'll be repeating what I said yesterday. And I'm sure, given the composition of this forum, majority, if not all, must have watched my speech. But even if you didn't, you must have followed some parts of it. So I don't want to bore you by reading again this speech. I'll just go over it and maybe mention a couple of things. And then that would be it. I will take questions. If anything, I'm speaking to people who are knowledgeable. This is not like an engagement that I've had at Jivanji Garden, the one that I had with artisans, for example. There's another one I had in Mombasa. I had another one in Kibra. Those ones, I would go into the details and even make it very simple. But for you, let us engage as colleagues and as people who understand some of the things that we are speaking about. So the speakers ahead of me, my sister, what was your name once again? Gladys. Gladys actually brought out the global economic outlook very well. And the challenges that we are facing, these are not new. We just came out of COVID-19, and then before we reorganized ourselves, then Ukraine war. And it is still going on. And that disrupted the supply chain completely. And now again, America does its election and brings another administration. I'm being very careful. And that administration comes up with completely different, a totally different trajectory. One that I even think even Americans themselves never expected. Even those who voted for Trump, I don't think they expected such far-reaching changes, especially those which directly attack the world trade and world economy and tariffs and all that. So we are there because we have to deal, we are a global economy. So the world economy is actually projected to slow in 2025, maybe rebound in 2026 slightly, but the effects of some of the decisions that are being taken today may be far-reaching and may take a while. And so we have to adjust to the changing circumstances as domestic economy. Our domestic economy, I agree with Gladys that we have shown resilience, and this is largely attributed to the diversified economy that we have. And I think I don't want to repeat what you said, that you eloquently said. Our projection for 25 is actually 5.3. I think you have mentioned 5%. But then let's monitor how it goes. It may be 5, it may be 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, depending on if we don't face any serious or unforeseen external and internal shocks. I think our economy had just started picking up from last year. I will tell you, even in terms of revenue collection, the first half of the year was tough. We underperformed in terms of revenue collection, and the chairman is here, he would confirm the same. The increase in revenue, if you look at the numbers, was just about 4.6% over the same period the previous year. Now, compared to the second half, there was a rebound. Now, the second half, the growth was about 9.6, almost going to 10, and we hope that that will continue into 2025, 2026. Then that would help us resolve a number of issues. So our economy grew at 4.7%. That again is not news. You are already aware of that. I don't want to talk about the macros. Our macros have been working very well. Inflation is contained. We also have enough forex reserve, I think the highest in a record, in history. We also have our exchange rate, which has stabilized. Again, we almost lost our currency in terms of footing early last year, and this was carelessness on our part as a country in terms of preparing for the repayment of Eurobond or managing Eurobond early enough. And that is why early this year we took a deliberate step to manage the Eurobond that is coming up for payment in 2027. So that we can avoid the repeat of what we saw last year. What has been a big challenge to us is the issue of interest rates. And that is interest rates charged by our commercial institution banks to the private sector. We have managed to come down, and thank God we have come down in terms of interest rates on government papers. Well, I know it may not be good news in the short run for people like Joshua, but again, in the long run, we'll all appreciate if this can obtain. Why? Because economic stability is good for all of us. If you can benefit from disorganized system for a short time, but later on, it may catch up with you. So we have moved from where government was borrowing at 15.6, 16%, on 91-day treasury bills to today. Last week, I think it was at 8.2. Last week, I think we fell to 8%. It was, I was thinking maybe we are going to go below 8, but anyway, again, I think 8% or thereabout is reasonable. Now, look, if that obtains again, if we can replace our debts, which we borrowed at 16%, with 8% debt, if we can be able to replace them, then interest repayment or debt servicing cost will definitely come down by half. And I think that is good for our economy. But this is not reflected in extending credit to the private sector, and we are encouraging our commercial institutions, banks, to try to pass the benefits. Some of these benefits, the central bank has done its bit. We are all aware that central bank has been lowering the rates, including even the cash reserve ratio, which has been lowered or reduced to make money more available. In fact, we discovered that there's a lot of liquidity in the banks after that happened. And so I think now is time to extend this to the private sector so that we can engineer economic growth in the country, and that would help us create more employment opportunities. It is my appeal to banks to take note of that and respond appropriately. Public debt has been talked about, and I was keenly watching your opinions right there, and I could see you are so concerned about public debt. I am equally concerned. And I will tell you that things have not been easy. Things have been tough. I think at one point decided to take a lot of loans at a particular time, which has completely disorganized us as an economy. I tell people that the problem we have in Kenya may not be debt sustainability as such. It may be more of a liquidity problem, a liquidity challenge. Why? Because if you look at our debt portfolio, a lot of it is in terms of maturity, is concentrated around a particular point in time, about 5 or so years. Actually beginning around this time, going all the way to 2032, 2034. Multilateral loans are usually not a problem. They are not problematic. First, they are long-term. Second, they're cheap. Again, also even some bilateral loans are not of a big challenge to us. A lot of them, again, are long-term and they are fairly reasonably cheap. But we have commercial debts in our books, some syndicated loans. We also have the Eurobond in our books, and quite a lot of it. Before this year's issuance, we had 6.1 billion US dollars in terms of that loan. But out of that 6.1, between now and 2034, we are supposed to pay 5.6. So only 600 million is going beyond 2034. And that will be from 2034 all the way to 2048 is when we are supposed to, it's supposed to mature. So around 14 years, you will not have any Eurobond if we don't again borrow other Eurobonds in between. And the syndicated loans, some of them are very expensive and some are coming for payment between September and October. I could see we have quite a number of them this year and going into 2032. And then we have the Chinese debt, which again is concentrated around this time to 2030. So this is the period we have a problem. And I was wondering why, well, I really have wanted to be in this position, but why at this time? Sometimes you ask yourself, maybe the timing was not right. But again, God knows, maybe he felt that because there are those problems, then I should be the right person. I'm the right person to be there at that time. So we will make sure we liability manage, try to smoothen the curve as we move ahead. Because again, you cannot just say we are going to clear or pay those debts. Because where do you get the money? And you also are resisting taxation. And for good reason. Because again, Kenyans are some of the most taxed. I don't want to say overtaxed, but you are paying fairly good tax compared to others in the region. So as we continue in terms of enhancing our domestic revenue mobilization, we will use it prudently to make sure that we manage our liability. Because if we don't manage our liabilities right, then we'll default. Actually, in 2021, IMF classified about 6 countries in Africa which were likely to default. Kenya being one of them. Ghana is one of them, another. Ethiopia, Chad, Angola. The other one is Zambia. Only Kenya is still surviving. The other 5 have defaulted. Are you aware? Isn't it? So we must be the exception. We must not default. And I don't see us defaulting if we just work smart. And if we avoid distraction. Because I was conversing with someone. I talk a lot when I go for haircut, I go for whatever. I talk to these small business people and ask them how business is doing. You people will not tell me how things are because you are flashy, you talk big things. But these ones tell you the real, what is on the ground. Yani, vile mambo iko kwa mta. How the ground is, including what the ground is saying. And this lady was telling me that, Waziri, things had just started picking up if it were not for these demonstrations which we have which are again starting. Easy demonstrations, sasa itatumaliza tena. And I believe her, because if we just let things cool, I'm not calling for being quiet when things go wrong, but there's a better way, I think, to express our displeasure. Let it not be disrupted. Like now, banning people's cars, I think it's not helping anything. And breaking into shops. So we could demonstrate, and I hope our security organs will allow Kenyans to demonstrate peacefully. If Kenyans want to demonstrate peacefully, because that is again another problem. But if nothing happens to our economy, things will pick up. So I know we have talked a lot about, I don't want to talk much again about public debt. We all know what it is. We are trying to deal with it. I've just told you we have to liability manage and move forward, and also cut on our budget. And let me say something there. What we have done differently this time, maybe many people have not noticed. And you mentioned it, Fred. The starting point for managing our debts and our budget is to start with revenue projection. That is where there is a problem. And we have revised. Sometimes people resist when we are revising revenue downwards. This year was very ruthless. They said, yes, you moved from 2.9 to 2.6. It is still unrealistic. We must move to 2.5. We moved to 2.5. Actually, the books I'm taking to Parliament next week is revising revenue downwards to about 2.4 or thereabout. Because that is the reality. These people are not collecting that 2.5. They will not collect it. I have seen, they will not collect it. So this year, we have made the most modest, in my view, realistic, ordinary revenue projection, because that is a starting point. That is the biggest component of our revenue. This is the first time that the National Treasury's projection is lower than Parliamentary Budget Office projection of revenue. And this is the first time Parliament was telling me to raise ordinary revenue projection. And I said, no, we are not going to raise it. It remains what, according to our tools, we are projected to be the actual revenue. Because it will not come from, there is no manna from heaven. We are doing a lot of reforms, but let us see how those reforms are bearing fruits first. So we have projected, in my estimation, the lowest that we could go in terms of revenue projection. And therefore, even if we will be revising our budgets in the course of the year, as we usually do, it should not be based on underperformance of revenue. Then we came to expenditure cuts, which we did. But I have realized one thing. It is easy to say when you are out there that government should apply austerity measures. Yeah, I will tell you, because now I have tested both sides, isn't it? I think none of you has tested both sides. So I can speak with authority because I've tested both sides, all right? So it is easier to say austerity measures, government should do this, but again, you will agree with me that there is a limit to which you can go with austerity measures. Otherwise, the economy would not grow. Government has also to spend. And then, how far do you go with these recurrent expenditure cuts? Because if you go cutting development expenditure, again, you are not helping the economy. And how far do you go with expenditure cuts? You can just, on a recurrent expenditure. I hear people say that we shouldn't have allocated so much for security. But let me tell you one thing. Yes, there could be wastages under security sector, but security is very important. Yesterday I was watching someone I respect as an expert and a former senator say that why would we spend so much and Rwanda is not spending so much? How can you compare Kenya with Rwanda in terms of security budget? First of all, Rwanda is a very small economy. Secondly, Rwanda is not neighboring Somalia. They have never had Al-Shabaab attack at their Dusit. There has never been Westgate attack. There has never been bomb blast in Uganda, in Rwanda. You cannot compare the two. We are so exposed. And let me tell you, if there is just one attack, even the money you want to make available for education will not be there. Even the money you want to make available for health will not be there. Security is not something we can compromise. And I appreciate it. When we engage with the security organs, it's when you understand the kind of threats. You are saying Kenya is not at war. Kenya has been at war from the time Kibaki was president. We have been fighting, only that we are fighting in Somalia. We have the choice either to fight in Somalia or allow Al-Shabaab to come to Kenya and we fight on our soil. It is easier to fight there. So we must fund our security organs to fight Al-Shabaab out of the Kenyan soil. That's what we are doing. We give money to KDF and we give money to NIS to gather intelligence. If today I become very hard on NIS, I would rather, if something, God forbid, happens, then we ask them, we gave you money. Why did you allow it to happen? But if I become too hard on NIS and something happens, the first thing they will say, you denied us money. And you lose the argument completely. And you're just taking responsibility. I don't think that is the direction we want to take. So we have to provide certain basics in security, education, health. If you compound all this, if you put together, and then the debt repayment, and then we created a big government, right from counties to national. And you give money to counties. Where is the money? What are you left with? So where do you cut? You're saying I've given a very big budget, very ambitious. You know, sometimes it's very easy to mention some of these flashy words. Yeah, they sound very intelligent. You sound very intelligent. You appear on TV and radio. And indeed you are intelligent, but you have just not engaged your mind properly to the challenges we are facing. If you engage your mind properly to the challenges we are facing, then you'll appreciate that 4.2 budget is the most probable budget that you can have. So allow me and support that we move commodities from zero rating to exempt. At least professionals, you people don't resist this. You know how Kenyans are cheating with this thing. But accountants in the room, I think you are enjoying zero rating of commodities because it gives you work. It gives you work because you calculate these tax refunds for these people. Hata hii bread watu wamekataa that it should be zero rated. Is that benefit really going to the consumers? I don't think so. And how do you subsidize and incentivize consumers, everybody, including the president? You are subsidizing his bread. You are subsidizing my bread with the tax you collect from Mamamboga. And as if that is not enough, I wish we were subsidizing for real. You are giving people who have not even sold bread refunds. Missing traders, they have them. Someone forms company X and another company X. Y, X is invoicing Y, they don't even exist. And you bring to KRA. Anytime we increase allocation to KRA for refunds, VAT refunds, you see an exponential increase. In fact, I think the officers at KRA start telling business people, now we have money. You can bring. It's a very sad situation. It is a very sad situation, I tell you. And sometimes it's draining. So let me just speak to two things, then I stop. The first one that I want to speak to is on the issue of reforms. If you listen to my speech, it was heavy on reforms. Because Kenyans are saying and speaking loudly that the revenue that we collect could just be sufficient and enough to meet our expenditures. However, much the expenditures would be. We can finance even this 4.2 trillion budget comfortably. But they are saying there's a lot of wastages, there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of theft. Yesterday, another friend of mine, I watched him say on TV that he listened to my speech throughout and never mentioned corruption. I didn't want to mention corruption because this word corruption has been over-glorified now. We should just say it is theft, that we are going to curb wastage of resources, public resources. Yeah. We should not use the word corruption. What is corruption in the first place? Who has defined it, the terminology called corruption? So we are bringing reforms to deal with this. I'm not a prosecutor. That is DPP. Igonga is there, he can do his work. I am not DCI. I'm not EACC. I'm not the police to arrest people who steal. What I do is to bring a framework that can deter it. And that is why under procurement, we are bringing now e-procurement. From 1st July, it's going to be implemented. We are bringing reforms in human resource management of government. We are bringing reforms in pension, because there is also theft there. We are bringing reforms in other areas like having treasury single account. We have brought reforms in the budgeting process. So this will help us cut some of the wastages and redirect the resources to priority areas. And I think the best thing to do is just to support me on that. So on suggested tax cases, this is now response. I'm reacting now. And that is where I think I'll just end around there. I think I've spoken a lot. I didn't intend to speak this much. Now, Fred, you are pleading that this case of people who lose cases at the tribunal, that they should not pay us tax. Let me tell you, if there's something that I want to pass in Parliament, is this one. Why? If we do tax assessment and we say that you are supposed to pay us this much, and you go to the tribunal, and your case is hard, and you lose the case, and you appeal. Just by merely appealing, you don't want to pay that tax. Some people will just go to appeal, not because they have a case, but to still delay paying taxes. That is what we are saying. So if you have a case, get a stay. If you get a stay, we will not collect that tax. But without a stay, pay. Ukishinda, tutakurudishia. We'll give you the money. Assume, let's just take it. Assume everybody goes to appeal in the whole country. We go to the tribunal, they lose cases, all of them, all taxpayers. And then you go, you appeal. You go to the tribunal, you lose, all of you, and you all appeal. Kenya will not collect any tax. How will we run our services? So hiyo, mimi nataka ipite. On Section 59 of Tax Procedures Act, by the way, this one at personal level is not very good. Personal level. I also, at personal level, would not want it. But in terms of patriotism, this is a very, very good proposal. Why? Because we will allow KRA to be able to see your financial transactions and records. So that those tax cheats, we are in a system where we do self-assessment. And so KRA now then decides who to assess and determine whether you have declared your taxes properly and paid them. What if this system is integrated so that KRA can automatically see what is happening? And what are these personal data? What are your personal data doing in a bank, for example? I hear people saying personal data. How can you trust your personal data with the bank and you can't trust it with KRA? Yate nyinyi mnatudanganya tu. If you can trust it with Joshua, why can't you trust it with Murithi? These are all Kenyans. Yeah? See, ni kudanganya. You know, Kenyans really know how to hide behind it. Instead of just saying, you guys, mtatushika. Na hatutaki hiyo. Wacha tuendelee kulipa nusu ya ushuru tunalipa. I tell you, there is no personal data infringement. I know this thing may not even pass parliament because of conflict of interest. Not anything else. It is conflict of interest. Let not the people, civil society tell you personal data, what, etc, flashy words, they look for very many words to coin around it. But the truth is, Kenyans fear. We have too many money launderers in this country. And that is why you can see we are being downgraded every time. We are being grey-listed because we allow illicit money to flow freely. And when you want authorities to see it, we all resist. Personal data, a robust constitution, Bill of Rights, etc. Now they have even coined another terminology, trade secrets. Now, what is this trade secret that you are keeping with Oigara? Utuambie then tuache hiyo trade secret yako. But the truth is, it is not the trade secret, it's not the personal data that people are fighting. People just don't pay some taxes. Hiyo tu. Shauri yenu. Wabunge wakikata, shauri yao. Me, I have made an attempt. And it is something that could help us collect more revenue. But, wakikata, I have no power. I will wash my hands like, what was the name of, was it Pilate? Pontius Pilate. Nasema nimejaribu. Wacha niseme ya. But there's also another good one that we brought in, but this is good, because commissioners sometimes can just wake up and say, now, the tax you paid 3 years ago, that was not enough. Hukulipa more taxes. There are some taxes you didn't pay. Ongeza kidogo. Tunasema, you have now to justify. Hata commissioner cannot be trusted with such powers. Yeah. You have to justify why you are assessing me that I should have paid more than what I had already paid. So that is also a positive thing. Plus, where commissioner, they make mistakes. Presently, if they make mistakes and determine your tax liability, there is no recourse for them to withdraw it, to retract it, to remove the error. At least we are giving the cabinet secretary, and not Mbadi, is the cabinet secretary, I am not going to be here forever, power to then correct that after recommendation from Commissioner General. So, Fred, we tried. Actually, I was telling her, as you were presenting, that we are committed to lowering tax rates. Committed. Especially even corporate tax. To 28%. Actually, that's the idea. We even did a simulation. But what stopped us is we were not sure whether these people are going to collect more revenue with the tax reforms and reforms that we see at KRA. So we have given them 1 more year to see how the reforms we have put in place in terms of the systems is behaving. If they behave well, in fact now Kenyans should hold Honorable, let me call it His Excellency, because he has been a governor in this country. My friend Ritu Muredi, Kenyans should look at this gentleman together with the Commissioner General. They are the ones who hold the key to reduction of corporate tax from 30% to 28%. If they behave well in this financial year, 2026, 2027, we are going to reduce corporate tax. That we have committed ourselves. On personal tax, this income tax, pay as you earn, which salaried employees, But when we do something positive, you don't talk. When we allowed SHA and the contribution to housing and all that to be tax allowable, other professionals have not told Kenyans that was progressive, and Badi did well. Now you see, many of you are working here under contract. After every 3 years, 5 years, mnapata gratuity. Hiyo, mtapata yote. I don't see you talking loudly and saying, tumefanya vizuri. Sasa hata hii tukirudisha chini 35, by the way, hiyo 35% is too high now. 35, 32.5, those ones should come down. Yeah? Hata tukifanya hiyo mtaongea. Si mtasema tu hii serikali ni ya kuchukua pesa ya watu. Yeah. So these are things we are considering. They are not in today's or this year's finance bill, but going forward, I want to give you my word. These are things that we are seriously considering. Very, very seriously. I want to end my speech by saying we all have a responsibility to grow our economy. We all have a responsibility to contribute to it. I will continue listening to you and to all professionals. We will continue engaging. In fact, this time, I think we should engage even better, Fred, before immediately we start the next cycle of budget process. I think we need to start engaging so that a lot of inputs from professionals like you get or find their way into our finance bill and find their way into our budget estimate. Thank you very much. I hope I've done justice. You'll forgive me. I've not had 2 weeks. These 2 weeks have just been terrible. In fact, I didn't even know what was happening in Kenya. I was in my own world. I was in my own silo. So I have done what I could. Thank you very much. I could not disappoint you. I had to come. Asanteni sana.
Let's appreciate the CS. And I don't know, Bonus CS, I don't know whether you should have gone too far because you have given us room for a few questions. There were many. They have asked about 30 questions, but ladies and gentlemen, we did that. We were not going to leave this place. But I just wanted to quickly, I think we can pass the mic to you. That's okay? Excellent. I think he wants to flexibly, yes. Some 3 critical ones. Excellent. All are good. Some of them are hot. Ladies and gentlemen, you can vote on the question you want asked. And I'm going to pick the first one that was voted highly. This is the question. How can we restore trust when a pen costs 20 shillings for one person, 100 shillings for the government department, and 150 for another office in the same building? That was one of the highest voted. So I'm just going by opinions. The second highest voted, I hope CS you've taken that. It's impressive that the Kenya shillings has remained steady against the USD despite global volatilities. What is Kenya doing that the rest of the world isn't? That one had 10 votes plus, so thank you for that question. And I think now the final, I'm just going by votes, is this one. Buenos Dias, there is so much room to cut waste in government, but there is no willingness to lose comfort and extravagance in government. Do you agree? Those are the 3. Probably within your seconds and minutes, if you're able to answer those ones, we'll be very happy. Yeah.
I'm telling him I'm analog, so I prefer papers, but anyway, I also use this once in a while.
Go ahead.
Now, restoring trust in government is difficult. You know, once trust is lost, it is hard to rebuild it and bring it back, and that is what we are fighting today. But we have put effort to make sure that we move towards making Kenyans understand that we are working on some of their concerns. Now, you are spot on, or whoever asked that question, or those who asked that question are spot on when they're asking the variation in pricing within even government itself. Where you find even in the same building of government, one floor, pen is costing 20 bob, in another one it is 50 bob, it is the same spec for the pen. So there are steps that we have taken. In fact, when I spoke yesterday about zero-based budgeting has 2 components, in my view. One is the justification from zero of the expenditure or on budgetary requests. That is one. That one we have just started. We haven't reached a level that I would comfortably say that our budget was based on zero-based budget on that line. But one bit that I think we have succeeded in zero-based budgeting is the pricing, because we managed to put a module in IFMIS to do the costing. So if you have told us that you want to buy a table with a specification, then another MDA is doing the same and another State Department is doing the same, you will find the price is uniform and you will not go beyond that. So in terms of budgeting. And then 3, if we actualize, and we will do that, e-procurement will help us sort out a lot of problems. Because now you will be able to do or put your tender electronically and digitally. Everybody will be seeing. There will be no much manipulation like it is today, where you carry volumes of books. Someone can just pull out a page from your document and then you lose the tender. You may be the most competitive, but just because you have not attached KRA clearance, and then you are told because you didn't attach, and yet you attached. Someone just went to your record, pulled that KRA compliance certificate, and then now you don't have it. And they tell you, you can't bring it later, that you had to attach it. So those ones will be gone, because now everybody who attaches KRA clearance will be seen. The system, even if you are in the US, you can still participate in the tendering process. So that is one thing that e-procurement will help solve. Even evaluation will be done through the system. So we are making very good progress. This e-procurement had stalled. When I came to the Treasury, I found because of 560 million, it cannot be implemented. That was my first assignment. My first misuse or use of Article 223. The first Article 223 that I signed was to procure, to get into the e-procurement. Kenya shilling remaining stable. You know, if you check the fundamentals which would affect the foreign exchange, or the foreign currency, you will see and you'll understand why our shilling has remained stable. One of the things that contributed to the shilling falling was, as she mentioned, Gladys mentioned, was failure to manage the liability last year, when we were in February and Eurobond is maturing in June and we had no strategy, and it was a $2 billion US dollar bill. So definitely we lost ground because there was fear of default and all that, and so that put pressure on the shilling. But if you look at all the other fundamentals, and one of the things that is helping Kenya is the diversification of our economy. We have very strong diaspora remittances coming in. We have gone to beyond over 600 billion shillings diaspora remittances. Our exports, if you look at our current account balance, it is reducing. Yeah? Why is it reducing? The exports are increasing. We may not have faith in our economy, but other people have faith in our economy, interestingly. So all these things, if you look at these fundamentals, they have contributed largely. It is not a magic. In fact, I was saying if we didn't even come in a little bit to manage the shilling, it would be stronger today. But we have, CBK has managed a bit. Because again, you also want our exports to be competitive. You can't have a very strong shilling and expect to sell so much out there. So I think I've partly addressed your question. In terms, I cannot agree more. There is room to cut wastage. But there is lack of willingness because we don't want to get out of comfort. Yes, that is true. I'll tell you the kind of pressure I get on that 14th floor of Treasury building from all my colleagues. We even sit in the cabinet and agree that we are in a bad situation. Things must be done differently. We must cut the budget. And everybody claps. PSS, the same, accounting officers, they agree that we are in a bad situation, our debt is unsustainable, the resources are not there, blah, blah. Immediately you land on 14th floor of Treasury building. Waziri, you know we have this pressure, someone like this cannot wait, you have to help me, this and that, immunization, the children will die, if we don't buy this immunization, There is a problem, we are facing threats here and there, things, everything, everybody, agriculture, water, health. I resist a lot. Hata mkiona budget na expenditure inaongezeka kidogo, if I just opened the lid, it would be disaster. Sometimes you get requests, like supplementary 2, we get requests for over 200 billion shillings. In fact, it was 289. We only approved about 40 billion. Look at that. That is where we are. So I don't know whether it is entirely the comfort or discomfort or whatever it is, or it is genuine demand for resources. But I want to end by saying this. We will have to resist some of those temptations and use our resources prudently. But we must also question ourselves.
Yeah. So what is yes? Oh, go ahead.
Before you finish,
Yes.
before
Yes.
you come in.
Yeah.
Can we really afford the kind of expenditure in this country where we sometimes appear like, can we really afford the kind of education, the way we pay for education in this country, where we want to subsidize even people who can afford? I take my child to a private school and pay 1 million per year fees. And when it comes to examination, I can't pay. 5,000 someone has to pay for me, and that someone is government. Can we afford that? I take my child through school, primary school. I take my child to a private school. High school, the same. My child now going to university, I cannot afford. That my child must compete for help with other poor children and must compete for scholarship, the 16.9 billion with other children. 41 billion that I've given for help is not enough for everybody. Why can't we have human heart in this country and say, mimi ninaweza? Mtoto, please don't apply for help. Those of you who are in this room, some of your children are applying for help and you allow them. Hata mnawasaidia kujaza form na mnadanganya kwa hizo maforms. It is not right. It is not right. In fact, I was telling my colleague who is managing the cash transfers to the elderly, which we have increased from 18 billion now to 25 billion, and that is not even enough. 7 billion more. And we have so many in that register. People who are even earning pension elsewhere, they are also queuing to get 2,000 from government. And we are denying this 7 billion which can be taken to SHA to pay for chronic, emergency and critical illnesses of Kenyans who are sick and cannot afford. People who cannot pay for cancer treatment. They are there in the villages. They are all over the place. Those who cannot pay for diabetes, it has ceased to be a rich man's disease, by the way. You go to the village, everybody has diabetes. People have blood pressure. In order to allow government to redirect resources and pay for them, you are also queuing in the line and you are earning 100,000, you are earning 200,000. Now you are refusing to pay for your child at the university because of convenience. Yet in primary school, when you even had a choice to put him in some good public school, you took your child to a private school, paid a lot of money. Immorality has captured the whole society of Kenya. And dishonesty. I wish we could come down, all of us. And it is very easy, by the way, to point a finger and say, serikali nyinyi ni mnaiba, na kila mtu tunaiba in our own ways. Because when you help your child jaza your form and you are lying, you are working and you are saying your child is putting there, my father, a farmer. So you peasant farmer. Peasant farmer, mother, housewife. So here, the housewife has left Deloitte offices. Deloitte. Mnaona kama ninasema uongo. By the way, that is the truth. Many people are doing that. Asanteni sana. Kama nimekosea mtu, tafadhali mnisamehe. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know Borasius needs to leave, but due to public demand and the votes, there's a question here. is there scope to cap shift and affordable housing contributions? I think that should be the last one. And then, is there scope to cut or to reduce shift to cap? Yes, to cap it, shift and affordable housing contributions.
Now, we are thinking seriously about affordable housing. I may not pronounce myself because, again, in government, the rule is this, that something that has not been passed in the cabinet is not a government policy, and it would be wrong. And again, I know my position as CS National Treasury. When I speak with authority. Sendio? Yeah, I speak. I'm the only CS, I'm the only person in this country who can commit Kenya to debt. So I don't just talk. I have to be very responsible. So I don't want to make statements that would be construed that I have already said that this and this is going on to happen on housing levy. But on SHA or SHIF, to me, let's still support that program. It is good for this country. Not that housing is not good. Housing is equally good, but we are seeing that it has now accumulated some good, some seed money, which going forward, we may start asking, is it not a revolving fund? We can sell those units and use the same money and do other things and all that. So we are already seriously thinking on that direction. We will pronounce ourselves. But on this other one of health, my friends, you know, universal health has never been realized perfectly well anywhere. Even the UK, which they say they have a good social, there's still a problem. Obamacare is still a debate in the US up to now. Even this one will be a debate, but I will tell you, kama mnaweza, contribute. Don't cap it. You know, if you cap it, you are also hurting the low earners. If I'm earning 1 million, wacha nitoe pesa mingi. That is the sense of insurance. Actually, you are also being insured. And insurance is that we pool resources together. Those who have more capacity, tunatoa nyingi. Wale wako na ya chini, wanatoa ya chini. And I gave a relief. It is now tax allowable. So don't take it if you are contributing. I know, Joshua, you must be contributing a lot. I don't want to use your example. Let me use mine. I pay about 27,000. Yeah, is it? How much is it? What percentage? 2.75. So I pay about 27.5. 27.5. Now I think you can start calculating what my salary is. So I pay that 27.5, but minus about 35%. Because you see now it is allowable. If that money comes to you, if we are not taking it, you'd only be earning 65% of it. Sindio? Is that really making sense? Yeah, because we would not have allowed, we would have taxed it anyway. If it was 30,000, we would have come for the tax part of it, and it would have come at the highest tax rate for you. Let's say you are at 30%. So 30% of 30,000, 9,000. So what we are taking is 21. So from December, we gave that relief. That was a step in the right direction. But still continue paying so that that fund can help many people. But for housing levy, hiyo tunaangalia. I think I've answered.
Absolutely, yes you have. Let's appreciate the CS one more time with a round of applause. Thank you. And we must also appreciate that the CS has done quite some work on awareness, right? Jivanji, where else? Everywhere else, right? We have seen him doing the work, and so we should really commend his work on that. One more time, please, let's appreciate him with a clap. Asante sana. I've been advised that I need to allow people to stretch because of those moments. The CS has really hammered some things in. So what we will do is that we'll be transitioning, even as we allow him to exit. We'll be transitioning to a panel discussion, but at exactly 3 minutes after this, if you need just to stretch, that's the only thing you can do. But Bona CS, before you leave, we have a gift for you. And Anne had prepared it for you. And it is a gift below the threshold that is allowed. So kindly, yes. So kindly come and take it. Kindly come and receive it right here. As you say hi to Saddam. That was Saddam, right? Yeah, so that we can have this. So Buenos Aires, kindly come up here so we can give you the gift. Last I checked, you are from the gym. Excellent. There you go. There you go. So Anne is going to gift you on this very quickly. Makofi tafadhali. That's how we appreciate that. Yes, and very quickly, Buenos CS, my panelists had hoped you'll be in the panel. Because you have to leave, I'm going to ask them to kindly come and join you for a quick picture, just a picture, and then we release you, all right? So let me have Chairman Carey as well. Of course, the Deloitte team as well. We're going to take a very quick one. Yes, just stand right there. Just stand right there. Yes, excellent. That's for the panelists, and then I'll leave the Deloitte team there, and then we close on that. There you go. Are we ready? 3, 2, go. Excellent. There you go. There you go. Lovely. Georgia here can be seen on the picture. There you go. Then finally, my panelists, you can step down, and then the Deloitte team. That's the last one. The Deloitte team, kindly come. The leadership, please come up. Yes, there's one more. Just jump right there. Excellent. Yes. This side, for balancing sake. Yes, come this side. Yes. Yeah, there you go. Yes. Excellent. There you go. Let's take that picture. This is the original person. So there you go. 3, 2, go. Thank you so much, Buenos Aires. We can release you. And I hope our members in the house, you have already stretched, is it? So we're going to transition to the panel. That's the last thing of the day as we allow him to live. Thank you so much. There you go. The podium can as well be released out. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to call my panelists because some of them have to see our CS out. So, allow me to just give you just about 1 minute or so, and then we shall transition immediately to the last agenda of the day, and that's the panel discussion. I must appreciate the interaction, especially the questions. Some of them I could not even display because some of you are very tough and political. I'm sure you can see some of the questions yourselves, right? That's why we had, but thanks for the votes. It helped to know what is the most important question. So keep that active, and even during our panel discussion, keep it active. So if the tech team can set up this place so that immediately we will transition to that once our panelists gather. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, in the meantime, please interact on your Slido with the current poll. What you believe in terms of projected revenue target. Is it achievable? Just share your opinions and thoughts. Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you for the reaction. Do you believe the projected revenue target of 2.7 trillion for the financial year 2025-2026 is achievable? There you go. Thank you for those results. Maybe. And a few people are not sure as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you must admit we allowed the CS to have some good time and answer your questions, so we have really eaten up on the time, but my panel is going to take less than 15 minutes, then we'll be out of here. So I assure you, we're not going to keep you for long. We're waiting for the chairperson to come back. Excellent, you're here. All right. This is how I ask people to help me. Can everybody who can hear the sound of my voice say, shh? Excellent. So kill the music. Let's now get started. Please put your hands together for Honorable Nderito Muridhi, the chairperson of Kenya Revenue Authority. Karibu sana. Please take your seat. Also put your hands together for my next panelist, and that is none other than Dr. Joshua Oigara, the Chief Executive and Executive Director, Stanbic Bank Kenya Limited. Welcome, sir. And it's good to see you. Also joining in is Fred Omondi, the East Africa Tax and Eagle Market Leader at Deloitte. Please, sir, welcome. And finally, Gladys Mukumi, kindly come back. I think they have reserved that you sit next to me, which is good. So please come right here. Partner, Strategy, Risk and Transactions, and Chief Operations Officer. Bwana Nderito, I'm sure you have seen the poll. The projected revenue, 2.7 trillion for this financial year. Is it achievable? A lot of people think that way. Yeah, they think that way. And I would like you to react to that. And of course also react to some of the things that you have taken out from what the CS has spoken about today. Feel free.
I do think it is, I mean, indeed, as most of the colleagues in the room have said,
Yes.
it is, with some effort, it's practical.
Okay.
If you look at, say, the last 3 years,
Yes.
we've been growing on average, about 13%.
Yeah.
So if you are at about 2.5,
Yeah.
you know, it will take you to that number if we stay on the on current performance.
Yeah.
And as the C has explained, if you look at the second half of the financial year, we are trending closer to the average. I mean, we are doing better than we did in the first half.
Okay.
If you look at the main number, and of course, you should never look at one data point, but if you look at the main number, we are 16%. If you compare it to the same period last year. So it is plausible.
Yeah.
I would agree some work. So the reforms that the minister talked about, if we have more time, I could go into what they are.
All right. Thank you so much. So I think I love what the opinions are. The CS, I'm about to call it CS as well. Governor, because he was my governor, also appreciates that. And right now, we believe that is possible. There's also another poll to help us just interact with this. But I want some reactions first, ladies and gentlemen, from what we have heard from the CS. And especially when you look also at the private sector, we would also want to hear from that end as well. So please, on your polls as well, react to that. What should be the greatest priority for policy intervention in this budget? The reason behind it is that it is good to help me have the first question. Debt sustainability and borrowing policy. And Fred, when we touch on policy, that's definitely touching on you together as well, so that at least we may understand together with Gladys. But I see the room is thinking that we need to think sustainability and borrowing policy, especially on the public debt. Very closely as well, supporting for businesses and financial services, the private sector. And that's why Dr. Joshua as well is here. You're representing the private sector. That they feel the greatest priority for policy intervention in this budget as well. Quite close as well in terms of support for businesses and financial services. Dr. Joshua, let me bring you in first because we haven't heard from you today. You've listened to the CS and some of the reactions. You've also been interacting with the budget process, definitely. I saw he referred to you a lot of times. In fact, I counted, I think there were about 3 times. There's something about it, apart from the salary part. So, do you mind giving your own perspectives and what you feel in terms of priority, in terms of policy intervention? There's a lot of support for business and financial services conversation in the private sector view. Please react to it.
I think he remembers me because he was my senior in school. This must be very personal. But I must thank the Deloitte theme, because when I reflected on CS speaking, the theme of today, which is on the edge, navigating the fiscal, you call it navigating the fiscal tightrope.
Yes.
Kenya's fiscal tightrope is actually what you saw the minister really having. He was really on an edge.
Yeah.
And it calls me, so my reflections is like he's facing what you call as a trilemma. On one side, you got public expenditure that you kind of have to meet because you have mandatory expenditure, correct? And Kenyans are saying, but you're spending too much. But on the other side, he has a debt which is almost pushing him to the cliff. And this is public debt. Yeah. And somehow you really can't push it in a way. Yeah. But yet you need some debt to kind of be able to meet your expenditure needs. And then finally, I was my brother here, who has to somehow raise taxes and get more revenues. And which Kenyans are saying, by the way, you cannot even. And this is really the posture. And I say that we are less, as Kenyans, we are less convinced, because I spend time looking at many countries. And I can assure you, in my perspective, Kenya's is much more, the economy is more resilient than our counterpart neighbors that we see. We are very much, we like to be able to poke into our economy. Across the 7 economies which are contextualized being much more into default, Kenya is actually quite away from that kind of challenge. And I'll just speak about 2 issues. I personally believe that revenue has to be raised, from what I see. Yeah. It's clear, so that trilemma, only one can win at one time. And that's why, Minister, you see sometimes he has to increase expenditure in this only issue. Now, my view from the growth momentum is we expect, my biggest challenge is to say, can economy grow beyond the 5.1, 5.2? If Kenya was to grow at 6%, you see, we are actually we are growing at 5.1, but we are the laggard of the region. Some countries are growing at 7, some are growing at 8. If we were to grow just at 6%, from the chairman of KRA, you can generate much more income, for sure, for the economy. So I am much more pessimistic. 4 fundamentals, I'll say, and who are spoken about by the team. From an economic point of view, it's very resilient and steady. But the sentiments, for us, what are the 2 biggest worries? First, Kenyans are very afraid of my neighbor on the side. There's a lot of fear. And we need to be able to get that trust deficit addressed. Correct? And then we have to bring in private sector credit into the growth of the economy. The ordinary mwananchi that the minister spoke about has to be able to have some financing power. And that is one of the greatest gaps. So government today is displacing. If we borrow 800 billion shillings today from financial institutions, then you can't lend that same amount of money into the real economy. And one thing we are working very closely with his office and the central bank as an industry is to bring in more credit from the 2% growth year on year, May, to more about 10%. If you do that, revenues will start unshifting to the economy, jobs will be created in there, economy will start growing.
Wow. Thank you so much, Joshua, for that. If I was on the other side, I would have clapped because of what you just ended up with. But there you go. Fred, you spoke, the CS was listening, and somehow I ensured that at least he listens to your amazing presentation, but I just wanted you to react. Do you feel he really flew with what your perspectives were as Deloitte, and what are your reactions definitely as well, just reacting to what he spoke about?
Yeah, it was good in terms of CS demonstrating that they're listening to the concerns of wananchi, and part of it is the effort that he mentioned that they're doing to contain the expenditure growth.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't do that, then there's more pressure on collection of revenue, and that comes back to hurt the taxpayers. Yeah. So that's one. I think they've avoided increasing taxes. That's clear. The issue of incentives obviously is debatable. So there's a question of which ones do we need and which ones don't we need. Yeah. There are a few controversial aspects, around For example, paying before you appeal. We could see that, they're very keen to collect the money up front. But then, when he mentioned that they'll possibly be able to refund that, that is not backed by history, So I can see the pressure in terms of, and it's to what Joshua was talking about, in terms of the dilemma or trilemma that he has in terms of there's pressure to get more without having to increase taxes. So where will this more come from?
Yeah.
It's more about, squeezing a little bit more from, the people who are already paying, bringing in more people into the tax net, the KRA doing a bit more in terms of their, collection effort, technology. He did allude to that, using more technology to not just make it easier for you to comply, but also to get those who are not complying to be visible and to be, targeted. So I can see some genuine attempt there, but there are some certain areas that need to be reconsidered, which, for me, the takeaway was that conversation needs to continue.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Sustainability and borrowing policy, and it's still on you, Fred, because this is a very hot topic. As you can tell, 55% of the people here feel we need to touch on this, and you're key on that at Deloitte. Quick one here. When we talk about the earlier discussion on Kenya's commitment to the national tax policy, which I'm sure the chairman as well will say one or two things about it, what proposals would you suggest to strengthen this particular commitment so that at least we hear a lot of people saying what a predictable environment, and now we are talking about the policy. Just quick sentiments in 30 seconds on that.
Yeah, so stability is one, avoiding numerous changes year on year, and reversals as well, because some of the changes are reversals, which tends to bring to question whether the previous proposals were well thought through. So avoiding that, actually for me, both as a practitioner and also as a taxpayer, if we could have no changes to the tax framework, the better, unless, of course, it's very pressing, because the national tax policy envisages that maybe it's once every 5 years that you should be able to see major reforms. So ideally, we should be having the kind of finance bill that we had this year, very, small, like I said, small, beautiful finance bill. If we could do that for 2-3 years, then maybe have major review after 5 years. That's one key, aspect of predictability. Okay. It allows businesses to plan. It allows taxpayers to plan. Obviously, because of maybe the experience in the past 2 years, there's a bit of expectation for more relief, especially for the wage earners. Yeah. So that's why we then brought in the discussion around relooking at whether we can cap the housing levies, whether we can review the top end, the marginal rate of 35%, or even if the rate has to be there, then maybe look at expanding the bands. Yeah. And that is something that is captured in the medium-term revenue strategy. Sure. So that is something that will still happen, and it was good to get the CSS commitment that they're still looking at some of this. I guess from where I sit, it's what is the appropriate timing given the revenue pressure. So we are hoping that, if the economy picks up, as Joshua mentioned, or if the revenue collection from a KRA perspective picks up, that then taxpayers will get some sort of reward, in terms of lower rates. And no, we are laughing, but actually there are certain countries where if the government exceeds its budget in terms of revenue collection, they write the taxpayer back a check. So it's not too far-fetched,
I'm looking at the chair, whether he's nodding on that. Go ahead.
When the minister said about we can refund it, and our Deloitte CEO was saying, it's unlikely, and she was looking at me that we can refund. But let me maybe just make 3 quick points.
Yes.
The first is that, the big effort in KRA is to bring more people in the room. Yeah. The numbers look a bit like this. If you think about how many PIN numbers are out there, you will find a number above 20 million. If you say, well, then how many file? And I want to remind all Kenyans, it is filing season, please file. You will find 10 million, so about half. And of that half, another 60, so about 6 million will say there is nothing to report, no return. Yeah, and when we discuss in fullness, you will see like this special table is related to that question. So the question is, where these 16 million Kenyans, where really are they? Are they truly outside economic activity, and how can we bring them to participate in financing the state? Some of our efforts, or a lot of our efforts as KRA now, is to use technology to make it possible for everybody to participate. Which brings me to that section 59. Look, good Kenyans, today when you go down in the restaurant downstairs, you will get a bill, you probably pay for it with mobile money. That bill will show very clearly how much is VAT, how much is tourism levy, and so on. Why is it not possible to switch so that the tax payment is at that point of the transaction? Why is it that we need to pay the restaurateur first, and then Maurice and I have to chase the restaurateur next month in today's technology? And that's what this section 59 is trying to do. Create a platform for us to do these things. Of course, in a low trust environment, then some Kenyans feel like we're trying to snoop into but really the import of the change that we are looking for in the law is to provide for that to happen. It's actually a business opportunity for some clever people to bring an app that sits below the mobile, like say M-Pesa or any other mobile money payment, so that you switch the amounts to the correct accounts, and hiyo inakuwa namna hiyo. And that's actually what we are looking for. But we recognize, because of history, there is some work we need to do to communicate. And we were, I think we are up to the task to do so. On this debt question, and I think the CS alluded to it in great detail, and I slightly disagree with Gladys. I think the domestic debt is the bigger problem, because it's about debt service. If you look at the 1 trillion of interest we are going to pay, probably 750 billion is in interest to domestic taxes. Yeah. And in terms of proportions, we are roughly 50-50. 50% domestic, 50% external. But because domestic interests are so high, the amount that goes to domestic interest payment is 3 times the total amount that is for external debt. And that leads to some bigger political economic question about, the interest rate on domestic debt and the ability then of the monetary authority to bring it down. And I guess we can go into that a little bit more. But it is domestic, and certainly the strategy of our CS and the team there is to see if we could reprofile. By reprofiling, then the total interest outlay will obviously then come down.
Thank you so much for that. And before I bring in Gladys, who's going to have the final say, when someone disagrees with you, have the final say is better. So let me ask the room, because we're out of time now. It's 12 o'clock. We were meant to end at that. Am I allowed to have some 5 more minutes? Just checking. Am I? Yes. Thank you so much. I've not seen anybody doing this. That's okay. Excellent. So, Gladys, let me bring you in. You've heard from what the chair feels about when you're talking about public debt and what we are doing. But you also made some bold statements here during your presentation. I just wanted to react to that around the discussion on public debt and whether part of this public debt is odious, in your own opinion. Please also add about what you feel in terms of just the state of the economy, because you spoke largely, especially on the macros and everything else. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I think the issue around debt, and as the CS said, is about the repayment cycle. And that's where the issue is. So between 2027 and 2030, those are tough years for us. And what happened again last year was about, will Kenya repay or not? And that's why everything, like interest rate went haywire, we got downgraded. Now we've gotten upgraded at least by S&P again to about a B minus. They have confidence that we will pay. But by that time, there was loss of confidence. And yes, domestic debt is significant. I know a lot of people are not happy about the 8% right now because everybody was enjoying, when the government was borrowing at double-digit rates, right? But then that is still an issue because then I think the fundamental question is, you're borrowing, what are we borrowing for? Ideally, we should borrow for development, right? Not for recurrent expenditure. And it's important for us to look at that. And then even as we repay, and he talked about maybe refinancing the expensive debt with the less expensive debt, yeah? Some of the tenor of the bonds out there, it's you have your 20, 30-year bonds. So by the time you realize that, what does that mean? So I think it's very critical that we look at debt, and you ask about the part of it, whether it's odious or not. And I think looking at it, you look at it in two ways. When you're talking about external debt and you're placing as a country, I know there are cases around it and what we need to do about it, but you have to also be careful where you're not seen as a country that borrows and then says that we should not have borrowed and hence we shall not repay, because then that's a whole other fundamental issue. So it's very critical that as responsible borrowing is clearly where we need to get to. And then secondly, it's about the debt burden then on the taxpayers. When you say, people will pay debt, even your grandchildren will still be paying back this debt. And that's where, the odious, aspect of it comes in, where it's in an economy where the bottom of the pyramid is expanding, well, it should be the opposite. And there's a lot of debt that needs to be repaid. That's what we need to look at. And right now, yes, the macros look great, yeah? Inflation contained, interest rate stable, GDP rate, 5.3, some rating, some macro agencies out there talk about 5%. The CS is very optimistic, it's 5.3. But wherever it ends up, Joshua says, maybe when we get to 6, if you remember the good old Kibaki days, when we felt GDP is getting to the pocket, right? We need to get to a point where we have optimal GDP growth that is not just infrastructure-based, but that's actually then sees cash circulating in the economy. So the CS yesterday talked about pending bills and something being done by the 30th of June, and then, people being paid, because money needs to circulate in the economy. And if we don't get to that level, Joshua talked about the way, as a bank, the government is borrowing at 16, 17%. You'd rather lend to the government than to Fred, because there are better, yeah? So, yeah, they're a better bet. So private sector credit shrinks. So what does that mean? Yeah, from a private sector perspective. So I think as we look at debt, it's about responsible borrowing, and then how we restructure that debt so that those 4 years don't come back to bite us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I only have about 3 minutes and then I close this, but Joshua would like to bring you in. And the reason is because there's some sentiments that I've touched on you, but I would like you to touch on the increasing access of data by government. They are really trying to press on that. So on behalf of the private sector, we want to know why are they so adamant on this, especially on transactions and all that. I would like to touch on that, but also on the sentiments on increased government borrowing by government, especially we are seeing there's an increment, and it could be crowding the private sector. I don't know, what's your opinion on that, as you also somehow give your closing end remark?
So let me just summarize and say what we really face today is what I call a trust deficit.
Yes.
I don't think that Kenyans are saying that we're not prepared for information. So today we apply the data protection policy as a whole new context to stop everything else. But actually, if KRA had a different conversations that brings in a more trusted person, and nobody's better placed than the chairman actually of KRA.
That's good.
Nobody has ever, because that's where we need to start moving the continuum to say, we don't trust. But the information they're looking for, Kenyans are already, those transactions are already happening. I like what he proposed. If I'm paying a bill in a particular store, I should deliver directly my fee. It happens a lot in convenience, in a lot of transactions, especially on mobile apps today. You pay Amazon, you pay a convenience fee here, and it's collected directly by somebody else. So it's more the engagement. So, and I like the Honorable John Buddy, because ultimately it's the discourse of conversations. When you talk down on your taxpayers, okay, the ones who are paying here by income tax, they have no choice. The rest, what happens is you can look for them, they will hide. And that has been the biggest problem we have. So I don't think the context is a wrong one. Because if you look at markets, even globally, today if you're arriving in the US, there's a lot of visibility on your social media information. Correct? And that for me is the issue that we need to be able to address. So in principle, if it goes the one model and saying do it, the engagement is what I believe that the Revenue Authority and of course the minister needs to do to get the Kenyans satisfied. Can we move KRA into much more and into a way they're much more in terms of trusted? I think definitely it's the vision of the entity actually to do. Let me just summarize on the, so we spend a lot of time on debt. One last comment. That's why the minister speaks a lot, because we actually finance the two bonds. Whenever Kenyan said that the Eurobond would not be raised, we had a different perspective. We believe the bond could be paid. So we spend a lot of time. So you have to look at it in terms of sequencing. In a way, actually, sovereigns never really settle debt. We need to have a different context. As the economist, you need to look at what is your present value of the debt you have vis-a-vis the future revenues for the economy, for the nation. These are the two. They will never be a debt-free sovereign. So assuming if our economy grows at 6%, our economy goes into $150 billion, we can take a much more debt than where we have today. So the debt anchor is a 55% of GDP. Now, I finalize with the questions that I think policymakers must worry about. If you think about Thika Road, and this is a question that must be proven by elements like the KRA. If you think about that road 20 years ago, you can largely connect Thika and Nairobi with development. But if you try and take how much revenue, so remember that road was done by debt. Correct? So that is public sector infrastructure development. So the small businesses, the owners, they're probably 100,000, 200,000 on that road, both sides. And this is the model for countries like the Middle East. If you drive into Sheikh Zayed Highway, the businesses there are paying huge taxes to finance the debt. In our case, I don't know how many taxpayers. It's the same thing as the highway. If you look at Nairobi going to Nakuru, if you see how many people can pass that road. So the reason why you fund development infrastructure is that the smaller private sector comes in and generates revenue. So this is the gap. The actors is to provide, which is my last comment, we have to provide credit. So this crowding out of government must happen. Because if they don't happen, we don't have credit to private sector. If it doesn't happen, then we're in this kind of trilemma where we can never raise revenue. So the minister is on the spot, he's really on the edge. Stay away from borrowing, correct? Stay away from borrowing to allow the industry to put in credit into the private sector.
There you go. I wish the CS was here to listen to you. Chances are they would have given you another corner in that office, right? But very optimistic sentiments there. Fred, as the final sentiment from your end, do you feel that the formal sector is disproportionately, bearing the burden of tax? Are we the ones who are really taking the entire burden for the entire Kenyans, in your own opinion? Because, I heard you trying to tell the CS that we hope we can reduce a few things. People are very happy, but go ahead.
Yeah, in my experience, that is largely true. And I guess it's not because of lack of effort. There's been various attempts. All of us remember turnover tax. We've had, of course, now there's rental income tax. There's various initiatives to rope in. There's even presumptive income tax to rope in other, let's call it non-formal, players. Yeah. But I guess the dilemma for the Revenue Authority, and maybe Chair will have a chance to say how it plays out, is the efficiency or the costs to collect from the informal sector. So there tends to be a tendency to focus on the wage earners, the formal sector, because you can always walk into Joshua's bank after every year to audit him, or you can find my payroll data from my employer and collect from me. But it's much harder to go to Mama Mboga and maybe collect that 100 shilling or whatever it is that they have to pay. Yeah. And I think before this session, we are just discussing and some of the ideas that can make it simple for the informal sector. Mm-hmm. Maybe do we have to have a framework where they can pay something small every day, not having to wait for the rest of us. We can pay at the end of the month or pay installments, but for these guys, they live hand to mouth. Whatever they collect today, they'll consume. Do we want to ask them to pay something small every day and then rope them in? So I guess there's need for more creativity, because we do have the proposals, we do have some measures, but the effectiveness of those measures is probably not, where we want it to be. And so we need more engagement to understand the characteristics of the informal sector, what is convenient for them. For us, when we talk about digital and the apps, that may be very convenient, but for, the informal sector, when you tell them to log into iTax, some of them will think it's a monster, so they're like, if you want 10 shilling, where can I pay it? Rather than logging into iTax, Of course, the revenue is still engaged in more efforts to make it simpler for them, so we appreciate that. But I'm just saying then we need to get a little bit more creative and make it more simple for those who would, who do not want to be as formal as we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Fred, for that. Why I asked that question so that you can react to it. We keep saying we need to enlarge this tax base and the likes, the reforms you've done, the ATMs, everything else. Is it working? What do you have to say?
It is working,
yes.
Albeit it is work in progress.
Okay.
My colleague here, Maurice Ore, I think you all know Maurice Ore. He's a tax guru. He's a deputy commissioner. He's a policy guru. Now, eTeams is working. Yeah. Where is the evidence? Mm-hmm. Much higher VAT collection. Okay. And I want to really remind Kenyans, eTeams is not a tax. eTeams is a system. When we speak out there in the restaurants, people react to it as though it's a tax. It's not a tax. Yeah. So that even if you are not liable for a VAT obligation, still use eTeams. Yeah. Using eTeams does not create a tax obligation. eTeams is a ledger, is a system. And just think of it like this. Ordinarily, earlier, before technology, we would sit with receipts, isn't it? Yeah. To calculate receipts, and when the KRA officer comes to audit, it is also receipts they are looking at. Now, that's the old style. Today's style is that all of that can be online. So that now you, as a taxpayer, all you need is to look at your ledger, and if you agree with it, that's it. You pay. Now, and this leads to this question of a special table. What is happening is that we have thousands of people who say, I paid input tax or input VAT. Then when we go to check where they say they paid, we don't find those customers. Not in our system, not anywhere. And that's why about 10,000 small, well, not just small businesses, who in 1 or 2 months had raised that, like 39 billion. And they're saying, we are paying, because you know how VAT works. The final customer is the one who pays. You as a business, you collect from the final customer, and because yourself you bought something, so you paid, you net and pay the difference. So when you say you paid, and we can't find that person who you paid this input VAT, surely is it wrong for us to ask, please, Fred, show us this person, so we can go and ask him to pay? Now, if you don't show us, that's where the issue is coming. And that's what that special table is about. So, if you look at May, VAT is up 11%. No, 16%. Just May alone, because of some of those efforts. eTeams is a wonderful technological software. We maintain it, so it's not a cost to you. And as all of us get on that ecosystem, even your own accounting becomes really easy. I agree with Joshua that, and Fred, that look, we should become more and more innovative. Like this question of, can our clients pay on a daily basis? Because if you think about, operators, I don't know, in Kenyatta Market or in Gikomba, a lot of it is a daily, and there's no reason with today's technology why we can't do it on a daily basis. And certainly, the reason we've gone to this API, whatever, open API, is to be able, so that, the clever people and technologically, whatever, they can create apps and systems that help for this to happen. Finally, can we build trust? This is a big question. Dr. is asking, can we build trust? We are working hard to build trust, Joshua. Some of the things we are doing is like this. Internally, we are reorganizing ourselves a little bit. I think you'll have seen the media, we have a new structure and so on. Domestic tax, we have split it into two so that there's some focus on the small and micro, and perhaps because of that focus, we can innovate more to be able to serve them better. So now we have two commissioners for domestic tax, one in charge of the small and micro, and one in charge of the large taxpayer, and we hope that is going to whatever. We have also reorganized ourselves in terms of innovation so that we are able to pick innovations from the marketplace faster and work with them. And you will have seen, in the next couple of weeks, you'll also see we are back in the market looking for talent. I mean, we have incredible talent there, but we want to add more. So we're in the market for 4 commissioners, 12 deputy commissioners, and a whole host of chief managers and so on. So let's build trust together. Who do we aspire to be like? We aspire to be like the Swedish tax agency. I tell you, every time a survey is done in Sweden of who are the organizations that are most trusted, the tax authority comes among the top 5. And we want to be, absolutely. There, in fact, they have very interesting things. For example, the electoral body of Sweden is a department of the equivalent of KRA, of the Swedish tax agency. Why? Because, anyway, let me not go into why. But that is who we aspire to be. Look up the book, From Feared Tax Collector to Trusted Service Organization. I thank you.
Thank you. And Gladys will have the final word. But we must admit that's a very good debate. I think it's a very good debate because we have the collector, who is you. You're doing amazing work. Probably we might trust you. But we have the receiver, who I think when you looked at the questions, they had a lot of questions on how they can.
May I, I'm so sorry, may I just add one thing?
Yes, I did.
That, and thank you very much to you, Deloitte, for having us here.
Yes.
We are going through a much more enlarged effort of stakeholder engagement, the way Joshua is saying.
Yeah.
So, you will see us out there having, town hall type engagements with clients so that we deepen the engagement to build a better Kenya. Thank you.
All right. Gladys, I had like 5 ways of asking you this question, but I just want you to close on this because there has been a lot of that. But for you, the perspective has been purely on Kenya, from the sentiments, from KRA, let me say that, from the private sector as well, and even from our CS today. Have you been moved a bit in terms of optimism, in terms of looking at Kenya and us not risking the way of some of the Asian countries, and even some of the African countries that we've had? Where are you now so far?
I'll say I have never lost hope in Kenya. I think for me, the issue, we are a resilient economy. And actually, when we look at some of the things that happen in this country and how we are able to rally, and like our private sector is also very resilient. I think what we need is, those reforms we are talking about, an enabling, revenue authority, a government that enables business to concentrate on doing business, right? That manages the fundamentals well, yeah? So now the stage is set. It's been turbulent, it's been tough. I mean, every business person will tell you it's been tough. But I think we need to get to that level where we need to just move, right? and it's about how do we ensure that the dignity of the person is retained. So the level of wage, the Kenyans are getting, is money trickling? Are we generating commerce? Because in whichever area or place, are we ensuring that the disposable income for the Kenyan is enough for them to live a dignified life? And I think what that happens is, even for chairman here, he'll start seeing his revenues going up because all of a sudden people are able to spend more. Yeah. So I think it's just, government policy being government policy. Joshua said, yes, we need to get to that point where there's more private sector lending. The credit is available for businesses to be able to generate what they need to generate, the revenues and the profits. And then we also need a policy framework, as Fred said, that is predictable, because business likes an environment that's predictable. If we have a finance bill like the one we had today for the next 5 years, Kenyans will be in a very different place from business planning, being able to say in the next 5 years, this is where I expect the tax policy to be, this is how I can plan the business, this is how I can project what's going to happen. Yeah. But if things keep changing year on year, then it creates a lot of uncertainty. I mean, you remember what happened last year. Last year was a very disruptive year, for business, for everything around us. This year has been fairly stable, and we were like saying, let this finance bill not evoke what the last one did. And you're right. So we are set on the stage to just move, but government also needs to do the right thing.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, our theme was On the Edge, Navigating Kenya's Fiscal Tightrope. And my guests are going to give me one sentence and then we shall disappear. The sentence is this: for us to navigate Kenya's fiscal tightrope successfully, we must, you just feel that sentence. Fred, you're going to go first. For us to navigate Kenya's fiscal tightrope successfully, we must do what, Fred? Your sentence.
Be responsible from the government to the mwananchi.
Be responsible from government to mwananchi. A round of applause to Fred. Thank you so much. Dr. Joshua, what must we do?
We have to play our part.
We have to play our part.
As an individual part.
Yes. Did you say play or pay? just let's appreciate Joshua with a clap. Thank you so much. Chair.
Well, thank you, MC, for doing that bit for me. I think we must grow credit to the private sector.
We must grow credit to the private sector.
Yes.
All right, a round of applause to the chair. There you go. Finally, Gladys, you have the final word.
We must have inclusive economic growth.
Inclusive economic growth. Round of applause.
Everybody needs a piece of the pie.
Everybody needs a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
That's a long sentence, but that's a good one. Thank you so much. A round of applause to my panelists. We're going to stand, take a picture, and then close this session. And as we do that, I know Anne has some nice things for you. So if the gifts can be coming along as we do this, so that at least we can appreciate this moment. Yeah, there you go, there you go. So Anne, please come up. And I think we have some beautiful gifts to the only persons who don't come from Deloitte. The rest of you, we shall see you behind the tent. Excellent. There you go. Please come up. Thank you so much, Chair. Yes, and don't leave yet. After that picture, we'll take a group picture. Pass the other for Dr. There you go. There you go. So we're going to pose for a picture, just together. Somehow, maybe we do a mix-up, just a little mix-up. So, CEO, if you don't mind, just right there, the center. There you go. Yeah, I think that looks good. Yes, let's have that picture. Yes, I will join the other one. Yeah, there you go. Excellent. There you go. Can we neutralize it? Thank you so much. Round of applause to panelists. Asante sana. And I have told the CEO not to leave so that she can close for us as our guests take their seats. Karibu sana, Anne.
Okay, first, a big round of applause for Maina. Great MC. Thank you so much. So thanks, ladies and gents, for staying. We had a very spirited discussion from the CS. I think he did a good job of explaining that and doing that with great spirit. Thank you, Fred, for you and your team for preparing all of this, but also asking all the hard questions. That's important. Thank you, Chair of KRA, for taking all the blows. You're usually the victim that gets beaten up. Never mind that you're just trying to do your job. But thank you for your insights as well. Thank you, Joshua. We now have a new word called trilemma. And all your wonderful insights from the private sector perspective. Gladys, thank you for I guess telling us that we're quite resilient as Kenyan. I just wish people would stop testing our resilience. So thank you all very much for this. We're all available for additional information. The tax team will send you more detail on the budget so that you can absorb it slowly. But we really appreciate your being here, and thanks.
There you go. Ladies and gentlemen, that marks the end of our amazing session right here. So thank you so much for being patient with us and even allowing us more time. Asante sana, my name is Maina Chege. See you next time, right? Bye-bye and enjoy your afternoon.